In our last video, we looked at the book of law, that internal belief system we all carry that defines what is right, wrong, good, or bad. Today, I want to talk about the moment you unknowingly break an invisible rule in someone else's book. It's that blindsiding moment where you think you're just living your life, but to them, you've committed a major violation that you didn't even know existed. I want to share a few examples of times when I was personally lashed out on or met with a cold, uncomfortable distance because I broke a rule I didn't even know was there. The first is what I call a responsibility trap. I've been in situations where I was held responsible for someone else's inclusion even when I had no say in the plans. Another version of this is the Silent SOS rule, which is an unspoken expectation that you should instinctively notice when someone else's mood shifts and immediately step in to provide emotional support without them ever saying a word. In those moments when I didn't include someone in a plan that I didn't make or play the role of an intuitive caretaker, I was seen as bad or uncaring. Both of these situations left me with this heavy, sinking feeling of being guilty for a problem that I didn't even know was my responsibility. Another time I unknowingly broke an invisible rule occurred when I took care of my own needs and texted the group that I was headed home early to rest, only to have that choice seen as a betrayal. In their book, my self-care was an act of abandonment. They didn't see a tired friend, they saw a rule breaker. In the moment of a verbal attack, I was left feeling shocked and confused and hurt. I even started doubting my own motives as someone I cared about was describing a version of me that I didn't even recognize. This last one was the hardest. It's when a long-term relationship suddenly pivots because they've been keeping a secret ledger of every time that I didn't meet an unvoiced expectation. They were nice for years while building a mountain of resentment, which I had just learned of when the explosion happened. It was a total shock, followed by frustration that they never said anything earlier and a deep hurt from the verbal attack. Suddenly, the history of the relationship felt distorted because I realized we weren't actually connected and a mountain of broken rules were being tallied all along. These are just a few examples of the ways we can accidentally break a rule that we didn't even know existed. In reality, there are hundreds of these invisible rules where whether it's a rule about how often you should call or you're supposed to react in a crisis, the result is the same. You're left feeling blindsided when they feel justified in their reaction. When you notice someone is upset with you, whether it's a sharp comment or that kind of heavy, cold distance, the goal is to bounce back quickly rather than being completely derailed by their judgment. To do that, we need to move out of emotion and into curiosity. Start by practicing what we talked about in the last video by asking yourself, what does this tell me about the rule in their book? Using the previous example, when I left early, the rule might have been, if you care about me, you will stay out with me until the very end of the night. Then look at your own book and ask, what is the rule in my book? Your rule might be taking care of my rest allows me to be a better friend. Noticing that gap that you simply have a different rule or opinion can help bring some clarity to the big picture and depersonalize the attack. You aren't a bad person. You're just two people with two different sets of rules. While that clarity helps you internally, the situation right in front of you might still be heated. And if you try to help them see the situation from your shoes, and the conversation is just looping or escalating and even causing maybe additional ruptures, just stop explaining. Sometimes the insight that you're trying to help them see is heard as an excuse. It is important to remember that in their book of law, your attempt to offer perspective might be seen as defending rather than an effort to connect. So to them, it feels like you are invalidating their hurt, and instead use a non-defensive pause to get the space and protection you need by saying, I can see that you're really hurt or upset by this. I need some time to process what you've shared so I can respond thoughtfully rather than just reacting. Once you've regained that much needed space, the next priority is to attend to the wound that you are left with. Much like a puncture wound might need ointment and a bandage to prevent infection, an emotional wound needs compassion and empathy to begin to heal. So I'll put a link to one of my favorite Brene Brown videos in the description because her work on empathy is so helpful here. So watch that, come back. And now envision that wounded part of you is the little fox that just suffered the lash out and has fallen into that hole. The fox doesn't need to be told why it happened or how to avoid it next time. It just needs to feel seen, heard, and felt. Instead of judging yourself, try to be the little bear who climbs down into the hole to simply sit with the little wounded fox. And by going inward and offering yourself the same empathy that you would give a friend, you create the space needed for healing. It can be so helpful to have all of those good and valid feelings attended to first before trying to solve a problem. This leads us to the difficult question: how do we act with this person in the future now? Well, first recognize that it can take time to regain your energy and your strength before you're ready to communicate about it. Revisiting the conversation is a risk. It opens the door for them to hold their rule as right and wound you again. If no repair is ever offered for the hurtful words that were spoken during the outburst, it is natural to feel the need for distance and to no longer feel safe being close to that person. Sometimes with time and space, the other person might calm down and kind of come back and be more ready to repair what happened. Other times they remain attached to their version of events and never fully acknowledge the harm that was done. It is okay for you to honor your need for space to heal. You do not have to just pretend like everything is fine just to keep the peace. Sometimes we learn through these experiences that the person we thought was safe to love and connect closely to is not, and we may need to adapt our boundaries to protect our hearts. If you too have ever felt like you were suddenly cast as the villain in someone else's story, I'd love to hear how you bounced back in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to join our growing community. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And remember, being human, it's messy, it's beautiful, and worth showing up for exactly as you are. I'm so glad you're here.